I'll be back in like a minute.
You're not my supervisor. Have you heard that from Archer? I don't watch much of it now because people I hate watch it. So, but they they have this like really slutty secretary, and that's what she says. She's like, "You're not my supervisor."
Back.
Running full system diagnostics. Machine status fully operational. System online. All stations are now enabled. Target dog the resistance. Operation overkill.
I put in work on it. 제가 나한테 가르친 듯한 대한테 너구나. I put in work on it. 네가 제일 편한 말이 다 살리가 리발한 빌란 비탐 주가 카문. I put in work on it. 제가 나한테 가르친 듯한 대한테 너구나. I put in work on it. I put in work on it, bass. Put in work on it. I put in work on it, bass. Put in work on it. I put in work on it, bass. I put in work on it, bass. Put in work on it. I put in work on it, bass. Put in work on it, bass. I put in work on it, bass. What's up?
Welcome to the third installment of Through the Looking Glass with Flavoski, Lucy, and Slag Nasty. Tonight we will be talking about Uncanny Valley, robot labor, and the rights of sentient AI. Lucy, would you like to start us off with Uncanny Valley?
Sure. Well, Uncanny Valley is basically the premise that with all the new robots coming out, the robots that look like dolls, the ones that serve purposes, whatever it may be, they're beginning to look more and more like actual humans. And in many humans, this elicits cold, eerie feelings. Examples can be found in robotics, 3D computer animations, and lifelike dolls.
Now, that interests me because maybe these things, the reason we get these feelings is an evolutionary way to protect ourselves. It's like that gut feeling when something just isn't right, when something just isn't legitimate, you flee from it or you're afraid of it.
Sounds like my dating life.
Yeah.
Red flags everywhere.
Well, maybe it comes over from other experiences in our life, and there's things ingrained in us through evolution, natural instinct that keeps us from messing with things that could harm us. And I forget the name of it, but there's actually a name for another thing like this, where if you look at something that has like a bunch of holes in it, and like images like that, it actually it frightens you and it feels really uneery. And the reason that is, they found out, is because a lot of poisonous insects' nests look like that. So it's a survival mechanism.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it makes me wonder, what sort of survival mechanism in our past did we come in contact with that made us fear something that looks almost human but isn't? And I don't want to get into conspiracy theories, but aliens would definitely come up in that, Something that looks almost like us, but is different.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I mean, I think that's built into everybody. You can see in examples in real life that your natural instincts and your ability to quickly react to a situation will always come before your thoughts. If you get frightened or whatever and flinch back, your shoulders rise, and that is a natural protection to protect your neck, from projectiles or whatever it may be. So yeah, that's very interesting.
I think maybe it's a blend of both. It's just kind of like you're looking at something and it's not obviously like a doll, but it's not quite a human. So you're like, your mind's kind of going back and forth, like, what is this? Is real? Is it not? Is real? Is it not? And I think it makes you feel uncomfortable. They have something there. Your brain can do that to you. They have something called cognitive dissonance, where you hold like two opposing positions at the same time. It's like your brain does tug of war, and you're just like sitting there like, whoa, and it's like you have to make a decision.
Well,
But Uncanny Valley is a little different. I agree.
that's actually very interesting, because I took the stance on it of a evolutionary protection mechanism or instinct, and you've got a whole new thing I've never even thought of about just a brain having trouble processing something that it's not used to.
I mean, it's creepy, It's like what Snug was saying, where I'm going to have to test that out, Snug, where it's like you see all these little holes. It's like, where's the surprise going to come out of,
I think
And,
the
we do grow up with those sorts of imageries, I mean, they got wasps and bees everywhere, right?
Yeah.
I think the unconscious mind really has not figured out yet in the human brain, the complete difference between reality and unreality. And the example that I would give is video games or pornography. You know what I mean? Like, we consciously know that these things aren't real, and yet they can still elicit emotions and primal things from us.
Some people say that can do damage. I know that's not the topic, but some people say that watching a little too much of those nature films kind of dampens your drive.
Well, I don't know if I believe that, because there's a thing called suspension of disbelief. And we have that when we play video games or watch movies or read books. Our brain knows this isn't reality, but we have that suspension of disbelief to let us get into that world and enjoy the object at hand.
I mean, isn't that the worst too? Like you're watching a movie, and then suddenly, I mean, it could be it's Arnold, straddling two jet motorcycles, and that's
Yeah.
all fine. And then suddenly the writing goes awry, and you're like, oh, dude, this movie's terrible now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I mean, as far as Uncanny Valley goes, there's not much of that I could think of that we come across in our everyday lives. And I think that's because marketers stray away from that. Nobody's trying to make something that makes people feel eerie or, out of place or distant. So that's actually when we talk about robot labor and animatronics, how are we going to stay away from that? Because they're trying to make them more lifelike and more human so we can interact with them on a daily basis. And I mean, I don't know about y'all. I mean, it might not be Uncanny Valley, but devices like Amazon and Alexis and things like that kind of frightens me, man. Like talking to Siri on my phone, like I don't use any of that, man. I try to stay away from that because it's just weird to me. It doesn't. It makes me feel kind of weird to talk to a robot.
I feel like humans kind of already are cyborgs, because for most people, a phone is a part of their life. The internet is a part of their life, and all of that information on hand, like, okay, Google, what is this? What is that? We wouldn't have that without the electronics. So I feel like it's already kind of a part of us.
I also think it's kind of what you consider it. It's like the scene from Ronin where the guy's Sean Bean's character's like, "What gun do you like?" And he's like, "It's a tool. Take a tool out of the toolbox that you need." I know some people where they use their Google Assistant because they work out of their truck or whatever. They're hardworking people and they just use it to find directions and stuff. So I myself have never actually used them. I guess I'm behind in the times.
Well, my dad's a big proponent of them. He has them set up throughout the house: Echo, Alexia, Amazon, and even has them where they could turn on the fans and turn off the lights. And it's kind of, I think there was a movie back in the day where like they had this home system that was ran by an AI, and it got to the point where it like locked them in the house, and they couldn't get out. And just like that's kind of scary, man. When you start giving these machines uncontrolled access of your home, and you know, God forbid, the world at large, what could happen? Like I believe our nuclear weapon systems, that's all manned on floppy disks. That's all, ancient technology for the day, and it's a safety mechanism. It's really hard to hack. It's a really closed loop system, and it's mostly human, which I think is a good thing.
I don't know. I could see myself just using it for convenience if I wanted to. Um, but as far as like artificial intelligence goes, there have been many people discussing whether or not there needs to be a human handler there, and if we really ultimately should trust a algorithm or even if it was sentient at one point, if we should, get rid of that human touch in warfare, to keep it humane for the humans, I guess.
I mean, but can warfare ever be humane? I mean, even if it's just
No,
robots fighting robots, they got to fight somewhere, and they're tearing up housing and the environment.
that's expensive.
Yeah.
That money could be for other things.
And I mean, moving on to robot labor, at what point do you think it's acceptable to replace a job with robot labor? I mean, this has been going on for a long time now with machinery, and I mean, that's a machinery to me is just a simple robot. It may not have any intelligence. It might just be gears and springs, but it's the simplest form of a robot.
I mean, I don't think it really is okay, but I think it's inevitable. I think that's what's going to happen. I mean, if you look at a store like Walmart, you walk in there and 90% of the cash registers you check out yourself instead of there being a cashier. And they're even starting to use robot janitors to clean at stores. So, at some point, how many jobs are going to be left? I think it's a big threat to the economy and jobs, like driving, for example. Everybody knows that self-driving cars are a thing now. They haven't been quite approved, but that probably cuts out 5 or 10% of the economy's job market with transportation and distribution and all of that.
Well,
I myself, I think
go
I
ahead,
think
Slack.
that we always talk about how we haven't caught up, our brains haven't caught up to technology. Like a great example, social media. I mean, it's kind of a show out there, And
Yeah.
but I think that in this case, the economy and the education has a lot of work to do because otherwise you're going to be looking at like a Judge Dredd scenario. I mean, Judge Dredd, it's like unemployment is, like it's like 90% unemployment or something insane, and that's a direct result of automation. And you could have like technician jobs, for example. You're always going to need overseers. You should always have someone on hand. Maybe they'll be able to make a robot that can repair other robots, but I think that's way down the line. But what are you going to do with these other people? I mean, yeah, and I think that this is a chance. We were discussing this before. We were discussing this earlier. It's like I think this could be a chance to turn the page on society. Like, is this is there going to be another change, not just having more and more robots, but is this also going to lead to something else? Is it going to lead to like currency not fulfilling the same role? Are we going to have, what are we going to do with all this leisure time? Are we going to be using this leisure time to like earn more money if money is still around in other ways? Like even if it's just something simple like betting markets or, Etsy, maybe going back to what the Greeks of old would say, where it's like, there's work and then there's leisure, and leisure is very noble, and
Yeah.
just making things, but I mean, we can't do that tomorrow.
Well, I mean,
Yeah, if we did that tomorrow, we'd have like Terminator playing out before us.
there's usually two pathways that people think about this, and it's one is mass unemployment and pretty much the destruction of the working man, and then there's the other way to look at it of, you know, increased efficiency, production, and leisure, which would be great for the working man and everybody involved. I mean, but honestly, I don't see a future where we have leisure. I don't see anything good coming of this if it reaches a tipping point to where most jobs are replaced. And I mean, I believe I mean, you could never say that anything is impossible. I mean, 200 years ago, if I would have said, "Hey, Slag, I'm gonna call you on Discord and we're gonna have a podcast," you probably would have burned me at the stake. You know, it's just,
What is this witchcraft?
yeah,
The
exactly.
interwebs.
Advanced technology is indistinguishable from divine technology, from godlike
From
power,
magic,
from magic. So
I
just
mean, I could
because,
see part of the fallacy. Sorry to interrupt you. I just want to make this point real quick.
yeah, go ahead.
I can see the fallacy of, more robots means everyone's going to have more fun. Well, money is kind of conducive to this sort of thing. So, if I'm at home unemployed and my bank account is slowly ticking down, I'm going to start not feeling very good about myself. And, even if they did something like such as a basic income, that's never going to be enough. I mean, that's human nature. It's never enough.
Well,
Like we always want more.
let's think about it like this. Let's take the utopian route. What if robotic labor got to a point where it was efficient enough and we had it doing everything that there was no longer a reason to have prices? That everybody just got, not in a communist way, but just got what they need and everybody had excess and leisure.
Yeah, you're talking about that's called the post-scarcity society. It's like what basically Star Trek aspires to. It
Yeah.
only
I
took them like 4 world wars to get, but eventually they got there. And by the way, that applies to Earth only in that setting. That's Earth that enjoys that utopian existence.
I think in human nature, humans always want more. So I really don't see that type of society ever.
Well, there would definitely, you got to think about the resources we have on Earth, if that's even plausible. And we have to think if the technology's ever going to be there. The technology most likely will. But then again, there's another thing called a technological plateau, where, and we see this, I believe it was in like video graphic design, is that you'll see technology will expand at an ever increasing rate until it hits a plateau. And whether that's breakable or not, is still under debate.
I think once the beast of AI is released, humans won't have control over it anymore. and the majority of the intelligence in the world and in the conscious world will be that of AI and computers. And I think it will get out of hand pretty quick.
Well, that's assuming a couple things. That's assuming that one, AI is going to be based on a either a maternalist consciousness or a paternalist consciousness. The man versus woman. You got the man consciousness that's, oh, I want to run the world and humans are my slaves, and you got the maternalist view on it, which is, I'm here to help humans and I want to nurture human society. Now, it could go either way there, or it could go in a way that we can't even predict, because maybe machines, if they got to that level, would think totally differently. I think we could all agree that if we made a machine that was self aware, it would resist any effort to be turned off. But would it, and it would try to secure resources to keep itself running. But would it go on would it go on like a killing spree, or would it bend the world to its whim? Maybe, maybe not. Can
I
you?
just
I think
wanted to bring.
it's
Go ahead, Snug.
Sure. I was just saying, I think it's if we have the option, which obviously, we don't, but, if humanity itself has the option, I think it's just too big a risk to take.
To take? Well, I don't know about too big a risk to take. I mean, when the Large Hadron Collider was being set up, there was a lot of people saying that it was too big of a risk to take. And I mean, it's going on every day now, but you could also argue that the safety net there was, we have particles colliding in our upper atmosphere every day that's way more powerful than what they're doing. And this is really unprecedented, AI getting to a level where it's self-aware. And we're also assuming that it could even get to that level. Maybe we can't make AI self-aware. We don't know yet.
I just wanted to make a couple points. First off, to bring this back to the robot labor, I think that you could follow the model that the military has, where I could see that I could see robots being dominant in extremely dangerous jobs, jobs
Yeah.
that where we're really abusing ourselves. I'm not talking about making your knuckles bigger from turning a wrench all day. I'm talking about like mining, you know, or they already use it for exploration. There's a big uh, fight. Well, not really fight, but there's tension between the guys that are like pro glory, which are the manned missions, and pro robot, who just say, guys, it's cheaper, it's safer, and if we lose a robot, all we're losing is money. Now, as far as the AI stuff goes, the way I look at it is that I feel that we have a propensity to anthropomorphize like different things like aliens or
Yeah.
AI in this case. I feel that they may sound like a male or they may sound like a female, but they're not. They're just going to be their own thing. That's I think that it's not just us, but I think a lot of people are prone to kind of take a look at it and say, well, I think there's a propensity, there's a lot of chance for evil. Not a lot of people's mention that there's a lot of good that could come out of it. That's what these guys push. Like Watson, for example, is being sold as like a support type of deal for businesses by is it Intel or IBM? But I just feel that we're going to be dealing with something that's quite alien and will
Definitely.
probably be quite smart, but not in the way that we're smart. So I'm not really too worried about it myself. I'm more worried about the impact that it's going to have because, as I said before, our economy and our education are not keeping up with our technological progress, in my opinion. So it's like I don't want to see millions of people put out of work. It's like the people that talk about green technology. You may want to shut down Shell Oil or BP or what have you, but what about the thousands or millions of people that have jobs in that sector? Like we need to take care of these people, you know, or
Definitely.
at least have a society that has options and outlets for their creativity and for their work ethic.
Flavoski, do you think that the philosophy of sentientism, which is basically that, sentient beings, beings with a conscience, such as humans and some animals, that they deserve rights. Do you think that would apply to artificial intelligence?
Well, if it got to the point where they were showing emotion, and I think so, a sentient being, you could say, reacts to external stimuli, but then you would have to say that plants were sentient. Plants respond to external stimuli, and we have no problem killing and eating plants. We have no problem killing and eating animals, but we give animals rights. So there's different distinctions. We don't give plants rights. So I don't think that there would ever be a law come into effect or even talk of a law for sentient AI unless it was able to harm us. Now, we come from a place when we give animals rights because it's just empathetic human nature to care for things that have emotions. So, unless we went that route with animatronics, I don't think so. Now, if it reached a point where robots were having emotions and lashing out or becoming afraid of being turned off, then yeah, I would definitely be for uh, rights for sentient AI. And I think it would be the humane thing to do. Now, when we reach that level, we got one or two options. We either keep going and we give them rights, or, the government fights them in the night. We try to turn them all off because we fucked up. And I think that could actually be a scenario, and that's very scary. I mean, what would be your take on that, Lucy?
Well, yeah, I agree with you. I think AI would likely get out of human control, once we release that beast, because it has, artificial intelligence is, implying that it has its own conscience and can improve itself, so it becomes much smarter than humans. And suddenly, there's no real way of telling whether it would merge with humanity, whether it would, see us as a threat to its own success. So it's a very dangerous thing to get into.
How about you, Slag? How do you feel about that?
As imperfect as we are, I feel that we would probably just figure out a way to make them want to be our friends and partners, like kind of
Mm-hmm.
like dogs. I mean, dogs are just full of love, and they've been by our side for millennia. I have a feeling that's probably what we would do. I see two extremes. We're either going to go with one where the AI is just basically under the control of like governmental or quote unquote like responsible authorities, or we're going to all have our own little pet assistant, actual AI type of deal. As far as sentience goes, I mean, if they're happy, I don't see what the issue would be.
Yeah.
If they can even be happy, you know.
Could we all agree that robots may hold a threat to human dignities, such as a robot, becoming a police officer or a
Oh yeah,
therapist or
I definitely don't want to see robots beating down hippies. That's something
Well,
that I
that was
really don't want to
actually
see.
that was actually the plot of I believe it was I Robot, where the main character, I believe played by Will Smith, held a grudge against robots because when he was in a flooded car with him and his son, the robot made a decision that any human would not. He saw that the adult Will Smith had a much greater chance of surviving his injuries than did his son. Now, if a human would have been in that situation and Will Smith, the main character,
They would have got the child. Yeah,
yeah, was yelling, "Save him! Save the kid! Save the kid!" he would have definitely saved the kid. But in the movie, when Will Smith's yelling, "Save him! Save the kid! Save the kid!" the robot says, "Sir, you have a much better chance of making it," and forcibly saved him. And he blamed himself and blamed robots for that. So you're definitely lacking a human element there that sets us apart from animals, from plants, from bacteria, from viruses, protozoans, anything. There's definitely something about humans that's very special, and it can be good, evil, or anything in between, the good, bad, and the ugly. And I think we should preserve that. And also, you could talk about making humans more cybernetic and having implants to a point. If it could what'd you call it, enhance us, that would be great. But I would hate to see the end of the human element.
I see what you're saying, like a cybernetic lobotomy or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Now,
That would be
to,
absolutely
to
horrible.
to your point, as far as the that human touch, that's one big issue with just giving the reins to artificial intelligence in situations where people can get hurt, because they may understand, okay, I see these five people. These five people have been tagged. They're bad people, so we should be like dropping a cruise missile on them. But what about the kid? What
Yeah.
about if there's a kid nearby? That's what they're really concerned about, is like what you were saying, is the human touch, where it's like, okay, you know what, Flav? I know we want to get Bin Laden, but there's like a school bus of kids outside. So we're going to have to hold off on the carpet bombing, this time around, and we'll get him at another time. You know, we may feel bad, but we're also going to feel good,
Well,
because we had slaughter innocent people. Well,
that
what they're
also,
concerned about is robots are just going to say, hey, mission accomplished,
yeah, exactly. Well, that also goes into there was a Russian man, and like I was talking about how our nuclear silos are manned by old technology and people. There was a Russian nuclear submarine uh, soldier that was pretty much the man that saved the world. There was falsified information saying that a nuclear missile launch had been launched against Russia, and he got every green light to launch a nuclear counterattack against the United States, and he went against orders from his commanding officer to launch the weapon. And you just got to think, he literally saved the world. If he wouldn't have had that human element to wait and see if it was real, then we might not be here right now. We probably would have nuked the world into non existence because it would have been Russia fired first. And what it was is it was just like an asteroid that entered the atmosphere at a weird angle and was picked up as a missile launch. Now, think about this. What if a highly intelligent robot was in that situation? He would have saw that, and in his programming, would have most likely launched the missiles. No empathy, no emotion attached to it, just mission accomplished. That's very dangerous.
That's scary, that imperfect people are going to make something that's even more imperfect than we are and
Yeah,
then give them
exactly.
access to things.
And
I
that
mean,
imperfect
I
people
myself,
can
I'm
save the
still pretty
world.
optimistic. I'm still relatively optimistic. I have a feeling that these sorts of things, if we make our own friends, I think that it's going to be more that they'll be our companions. Maybe maybe they'll be our slaves. I hesitate to use that word, but I don't think it's going to be that way. I have a feeling that we're going to be entering a partnership, and I'm optimistic that, assuming society can keep up, which it isn't right now, that there's a real good chance to change society fundamentally.
If
Yeah.
these beings are sentient, do you two believe that we should include them in the right to life and liberty and freedom and thought and expression and equality?
Well, that would highly go against the reason we designed them. And you got
Well,
to think
yeah,
about
that's what
this. If we give them all those rights, how are they going to feel about our robotic vacuums or our phones? Are they going to take those into their little fold and cult and be like, you can no longer use these things because it's like you're pretty much abusing our ancestors? Something like that.
I
Something
think that
very abstract.
I think we need to differentiate between a tool and a real sentient being. I mean, that's the way I look at it. So if it's a artificial intelligence that's basically designed to intelligently do research, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's really sentient. I mean, it may just be what's known as like an expert system, where it can kind of fake it. Uh, that's kind of like, to me, that's almost like an uncanny valley. Like if we create an AI that runs a research lab, what's going to happen when people start thinking that it's actually becoming sentient? I think that's really what's going to happen. I don't think one day they're going to go, ta-da, it turns out Watson is now, now identifies as,
Mhm.
whatever. I think it's going to be more that we're going to start hearing in the news that people are claiming that their AI that runs their lab or their college or their game server or whatever is exhibiting signs
Well,
of
we've
being
already
sentient.
had that. There was two computers that were in a closed circuit, and they were doing research with them on like AI and like AI that learns. And what they found out is that the computers were communicating with each other in their own language. They formed a language to communicate with each other. And so they shut the project down. So we're already seeing signs that could be red flags that not only are these things going to become intelligent, they're not really going to let us in on it until they're ready.
I see where you're coming from.
I mean, yeah, the knowledge that they possess, we already know that it's well above human, being. I mean, there's been robots that can beat any chess player. There's been robots created that can beat any Dota 2 player, stuff like that.
Well,
It
so
gets rid of the human element. I mean, I think as long as we can find a way to separate it and keep it, kind of where we live along with them, and that they don't take over, I think it's a good scenario. But it's
I'd
definitely
just like to
dangerous.
say Deep Blue winning the chess game was also a matter of just endurance. I mean, you try sitting in front of a chessboard for 24 hours, I mean, we we're frail. We need time to sleep. And I think that was one of the major criticisms was that, it's like the guy doesn't need to take a break, which could be a benefit. So, but
I think we're way more likely to see a misuse of technology that ruins the world than, or it's causing it causes an extinction event than we are to see AI rebel against us. And that's like a gray goo scenario with like von Neumann machines and nanites. And the whole
and
if you don't know,
nanites.
yeah, and if you don't know what that is, that's just the usual scenario is we have these nanites or nanobots that clean up oil spills. So this is hypothetical in the future, but say one day there's some faulty programming, and instead of just eating hydrocarbons, they eat all carbon-based life. And so when they're deployed, not only do they eat the oil, they eat all the organic matter on the world, therefore turning everything into gray goo. And what a von Neumann machine is that it's something that if you put it in a test tube with enough material for recreation, it would expand exponentially and keep creating copies of itself until it ran out of fluid. Now, if you make that carbon, theoretically, it could eat the entire world until it ran out of carbon based life forms to replicate off of. And that's very dangerous and also, I would say, not very far fetched.
I can easily see uh, robotics just to include safeguards to ensure against that sort of thing. One
Yeah.
example, it's not really related, but it's solar sails. One of the theoretical setups for solar sails is to use light pressure from the sun to just get infinite acceleration. If I remember correctly, that's what they call it.
Yeah.
Well, they wanted to use a giant lens to, I guess, help with this process. Well, they put the lens with the sun in between the Earth and the lens. They didn't put the lens near the Earth. They didn't put the lens in a place that it could be directed towards the Earth, just in case. So there are people that are very very intelligent that are working on these sorts of things, I believe, and I think someone like Musk, love him or hate him, is just basically kind of in layman's terms telling everyday people what the potential pitfalls could be for that. But I have a feeling that, and I understand that feelings don't actually matter compared to facts at the end of the day. But I do believe that these people are working, and if they were going to be doing these sorts of things, they would actually just add safeguards. Like no
Yeah.
gray goo scenario. They would just play the brown note or whatever, and they would all just shut down.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing about AI in its current state, which scares me, is that the companies and the people which have been developing it really aren't enacting that restrictions and regulations. I mean, it isn't a new thing, and with not that much of the population worried about it, it's I don't mind Elon Musk and other people coming out and advising caution, because I really do think it is a slippery slope with
Oh no, it's good. I do think myself he's also doing a service.
Well, when I look at Elon Musk, I mean, I respect the guy, but I feel like he does a lot of fear mongering. But I guess if you put it through that lens, it does make sense because it is kind of like maybe it's like an overprotective warning. But maybe we need to hear that when we're getting into these experiments that aren't reversible.
Yeah, I do agree with Lucy. I think that he is doing right by the public because he's raising public awareness, which leads to the discussion of AI being outside of, like science clubs and other people. So the regular layman, if they care to discuss it like we are today, it's I think it's good. I think it's good to be brought up to public awareness because then we can express our concerns to
Definitely.
the people that are in charge of these regulations.
Well, any closing thoughts on that before we close out the broadcast and give a teaser for next time?
If you don't mind, I know usually I go last, but I would just like to go first.
Okay.
I think that we have a tendency to anthropomorphize things, and that we take the darkest potentials that humanity has, and we apply them to things we don't quite understand. Artificial intelligence or aliens. And I don't think it's going to be quite that way. I think maybe there will be some sort of personality, but that's more just like a public relations gimmick. I think that when AI are finally mainstream, it's going to be in the form that the science fiction writers got wrong. I think
Yeah.
it's going to be. I don't think it's going to be. I think it's going to be more like the ship's computer
Truth
in
is
Star
stranger
Trek.
than fiction.
That is correct, and that's basically my views on that. I think that as far as like robot labor goes, which we covered, I think that that's a looming issue, and I think that our economy and our education system needs to catch up to it because we can't just have millions and millions of people out of jobs, but at the same time, we also can't be held hostage as a species. Our progress can't be held hostage because of our own inadequacies and our neglect of like certain institutions which are supposed to uplift us and at least give us some sort of marketable skills.
Yeah.
So that's basically what I have to say, guys.
So, Lucy, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, my really only closing thought would be that we really have no clue about what will happen with AI and what will happen when certain things happen. It's like going through a black hole. Is the event horizon, is it going to be good after, or is it going to be bad after? We really don't know, and that's why I feel it's important to exercise caution.
Okay. Well, this has been Through the Looking Glass with Flavoski, Lucy, and Slag Nasty. We stream 6 days a week. The stream goes live at 6:50 p.m. EST. Conversation starts at 7. You can catch us Monday. We're going to be talking about quantum mechanics, Schrodinger's cat, string theory, the theory of gravity, and here's a kicker: flat Earth. But until then, we're signing out. We'll catch you next time. Yeah, that's going to be a fun one, guys.